All right, welcome back, everyone. Now we're ready to get started with our second panel, which is going to be about entrepreneurship, which is obviously also very vital to our innovation ecosystem here today. We're about to hear from successful entrepreneurs, attorneys who specialize in startups, business leaders, as well as educators who are focusing on honing in the skills that are required to launch a successful startup. So I'd like to invite our panel to come up to the stage while I introduce the moderator, who is Dennis Bone. Dennis Bone is the director of the Montclair University's Feliciano Center for Entrepreneurship at the Feliciano School of Business. He's also a former president of Verizon, a well-known business leader, as well as technology leader. Dennis will be introducing our panelists. Take it away, Dennis. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to do this seated. So good morning. I think we're still in the morning, everybody. I know I've been just really thrilled with all the conversation that has gone on here this morning. And our panel is going to take a little bit of a different tact, if you will, from before. I know Bob Hugan challenged all of us to make sure that we stoke the innovation ecosystem of New Jersey, because if we don't, the economic future is not going to be nearly as bright as that we can make it. So part of what I hope becomes clear to all of you from our panel discussion is basically what is the state of innovation, especially from the eyes of entrepreneurship and deal making and all the aspects of innovation that you have to have clicking on all cylinders. And then we'll have a series of questions, and then I want to turn it over to you to make sure that you get to ask your questions. By the way, I'm slightly upset, facetiously, that I don't have a woman on this panel. And Catherine knows this because I told her. I think Catherine stole Kathy Coviello because she was on our panel, and then I looked, and she wasn't on our panel. She was on the one before. And for we created Women Entrepreneurship Week and owned that up at Montclair State University, and we pride ourselves in nurturing women entrepreneurs. But I know this doesn't look like. Thanks, Catherine. Okay. Instead of me introducing these folks, and you can see their amazing bios, and there's something very unique about every one of these individuals, so look at their bios and see what that is. But I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, but in introducing themselves and telling you a little bit about what they do, to focus specifically on where their place is, their role, where they sit, where they stand in New Jersey's innovation ecosystem. Start with Clark.
So about 5 years ago, I had an amazing idea, and like any great entrepreneur, I was sure I was going to make a lot of money doing it. So of course, I quit my job and put all my money on myself. And over the next probably 18 months, I raised money from my family, my friends, angel investors, and even venture capital partners. And 2 years later, I had no money. My business was no longer around. And I'm on my second venture, and we're making money, and it's growing. But I use that for part of how I'm involved in the state of New Jersey. When I was running my business, I felt that I didn't have a lot of good resources, and I was approached by a lot of consultants that told me I should do certain things if I gave them money. So if you're starting your business, you'll probably have situations like that as well. So I created an organization called Scarlet Startups, and we host events at Rutgers with the students and alumni to help young stage entrepreneurs kind of understand how to launch a business, find great partners, and ultimately grow the business. So 5 years later, I've learned a lot, and now I have a business that's working. So hopefully some of the advice and tips today can help you get there as well.
Hi, I'm Greg Olson. I'm a Jersey boy. I grew up in Ridgefield Park, graduated high school there, went to Fairleigh Dickinson, worked at RCA Sarnoff Labs, now have a daughter in Colts Neck and 3 grandkids, and now I live in Montgomery. So, my New Jersey credentials, I think, are impeccable. And I'm here for a reason. It's a great state to not only live, but to work in. Now, I hear people complain about the taxes and the wages, and I say, just look across the river at Manhattan. That's extremely expensive. It's crowded. Taxes are enormous. So why does everybody want to live there? And it's the same thing applies to New Jersey. It's a great place to work in, and there's no free lunch. So that's my point of view on New Jersey. I was a research scientist at Sarnoff for 11 years. I started and sold 2 high technology businesses, and now I do angel investing. I've got about 6 companies. Some of the highlights, 3 of them are close by here. Most of them are in New Jersey, too. Princeton Power is the spinoff from Princeton University. Darren Hamill's the CEO, and they do energy storage for wind, solar, and grid applications. They're down in Lawrenceville. 2 miles up the road is United Silicon Carbide, which is the next generation of transistor, started by Chris Dries, who got his PhD at Princeton University. And a third one, financially the most successful one I have, is Power Survey Corporation, founded by Tom Catanese out of Sarnoff, and they do stray voltage detection. They go around cities looking for manhole covers and street lamps that are electrified, and just made a great business out of it. I'm sure we'll be talking about our investment philosophies and so on, but I look at people, not at technologies and companies.
I'm Dave Soren. Unlike Greg, I am not a New Jersey native. But hey, wait, New Jersey's my adopted state. I was a New Yorker, started my career on Wall Street representing investment banks that were investing in or taking technology companies public. And what I realized as I was kind of growing up as a lawyer is that it would be way more fun to represent the innovators. And so I came out to New Jersey in the early 1990s to do just that, and I've been representing companies in the technology and life science industries ever since. Currently, and for the last couple of years after building a law firm, we merged our law firm into the state's largest firm, McCarter & English, where I head the venture capital and emerging growth company practice. We take a little bit different tack, I think, than most law firms in that we are not lawyering for the sake of lawyering, but we are lawyering for the sake of helping entrepreneurs solve their business problems. One of the things that struck me when I first came here in the early 90s was it seemed that New Jersey's tech community was succeeding in spite of itself. Unlike Silicon Valley, where there was a center of commerce and a major university that was really promoting technology in the state, or the Route 128 corridor up in Boston, where MIT and Harvard were just absolutely integral. We had universities that really only now are becoming much more involved, and that's a very good sign for technologies, for New Jersey's technology ecosystem. But we didn't have a statewide organization to network, and I worked with Catherine and others to co-found the New Jersey Technology Council 20 years ago. We realized that there wasn't an indigenous venture capital fund in the state. And Jim Gunton is here. We worked with Jim 16, 17 years ago to create the first early stage venture fund in the state. And now, after really successful exits and returns on investment, those guys are raising another fund, which is great for our ecosystem. There was no angel network to speak of in the state, and again, we worked with Catherine and others to help promote the first real angel network. So my career has been about not just being a lawyer, but helping to create the opportunities for people in the state. And our most recent initiative is a new virtual accelerator program where the companies that are admitted to the accelerator actually own the accelerator itself. And this is a new model on accelerators where we're really trying to create a collaborative ecosystem for companies to feel like they're in it together and working together to build each other's companies. And it is primarily a New Jersey initiative. It's supported by McCarter & English, a couple of very large accounting firms, We have venture capitalists like Jim and angels like Catherine who are mentors. We have over 90 mentors that are helping these companies grow. We admitted our first class in September. But unlike other accelerator programs, we're only admitting one class a year because one of our concerns was companies are in and out of accelerators in 15, 16 weeks, barely enough time to grow wings. And so our accelerator program lasts for a full year. The mentors are available for that entire time as well. And it's important that all of us, as my fellow panelists, are part of solving the problems and not just providing our services or products.
Thanks, Dave.
If I could add, you'll read in my biography that Sensors Unlimited sold for $600 million about 16 years ago. Dave was the legal counsel for that deal.
This man's a legend. He can tell you the story. This man's a legend.
So, so you're starting to pick up. First of all, I love the diversity of the panelists here because they each bring, first, longevity, been around a while, doing things, but they also, their experiences and what they've done is basically through different lenses, and I think that's very important as we explore this issue of how what's the state of innovation and how can we make it more innovative. I'm going to start with David and come back down, but David, you've been doing deal flows, and by the way, this is not research defined, but just my observation. I think David has probably done more deals in the startup community than any other attorney in New Jersey, so I really appreciate his perspective there. But over the years, David, that you've been doing your work, what's any trends, anything that you see different in the deal flow? Give us some perspective on what's going on from your point of view.
I'm glad to. You know, I think one of the most intriguing things, and which I view as really favorable, is the decline in capital intensity for companies. You know, 10 or 15 years ago, it would have taken far more capital and far longer time period to get from conception, development to commercialization, positive cash flow and profitability. That spurs entrepreneurial activity to a very great degree, and I think that is a really positive event. The other things that we're seeing kind of more recently is because of the interest in entrepreneurship, there is far more money available for capital investment in early stage companies. And because less capital is necessary, it's a lower risk profile. We're also seeing a dramatic increase in corporate venture capital, probably in part because these corporations are looking to de-risk. So rather than start the development process internally, they allow others to do that. And once that product or solution has been de-risked, they come in and either invest in it or buy it. There are significant valuation pressures today on companies. So we are seeing entrepreneurs needing to have a little bit more discipline, maybe a little bit more acceptance of the fact that, Clark, you were talking about, the valuation early on isn't going to be a home run. You have to position yourself for future success. There's also, at least for the last 10 years, a real vacuum in the marketplace because there has not been a robust IPO market. In the absence of a robust IPO market, there are challenges for entrepreneurs. The exits then are sell-side exits, as the first panel was talking about. And we need to have a capital system, a capital raising system that allows for liquidity opportunities in addition to sell-side transactions. There's been a lot of regulatory change over the last year and a half. I am one who has a sense of optimism that some of the new regulations, like Regulation A+, will help fill the vacuum and create an alternative to IPOs. And the last thing that I would talk about is what's old is new again, and I think we hear this over and over again. After 5 or 6 or 7 years of a movement away from equity capital to convertible notes and more recently safes and KISSes, we're seeing a real sea change back to priced equity because of the qualified small business stock exclusion, for example. And the challenge has been for lawyers and investors and entrepreneurs to find a cost-effective way for that capital to be raised, even though equity capital tends to be more complicated. And we're seeing that with a new security called the Series Pre-Seed, where we've worked with Techstars Ventures to create a kind of standardized set of documents. So, I think it all begins and ends around the capital raising efforts and what the exit opportunities are. But it's been really interesting times.
Dave is absolutely right about the amount of money sitting on the sidelines. There is a lot. And the reason for that is investors are being much more selective now than, say, they were 15 years ago during the dot-com boom. So, that's, while the money is there, you got to work harder to get it.
So Clark, in the, what'd you say, 6 years ago? What changes have you seen over that 6 years?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of look at myself as maybe like a New Jersey poster child for an entrepreneur, because when I started kind of launching my business, there was basically nothing, in my opinion, out there for someone that was going from corporate America to starting a business, and now to see the sort of evolution for events and opportunities, and I pretty much have participated in just about every one of them. Honestly, anytime I hear something new, I'm like, put me in. Let me be your first group of companies or entrepreneurs that come through. And so what I find is that there's so many more resources that are smart resources. So when I first started my business, I was going to Manhattan all the time for tech support, for meeting and networking with other entrepreneurs. And I'm like, how am I driving 45 minutes in another hour? And now I'm seeing there was a peak maybe about a year or two ago of other events and other organizations. And I think it grew a little too quickly, and now we've seen a slight retraction. So now the quality of events and quality of kind of like hubs of people that are really intelligent, really great resources are a lot more readily available for people now.
Yeah. So the last panel, one of the last questions of the last panel talked about how higher education is getting more into the entrepreneurial area, being more supportive. So I'd just like to throw out to the panelists, and Dave, you touched on it a little bit before, but in the higher ed space, so it seems to be many organizations are stepping up, and I see friends here like Don from NJIT, who has this amazing incubator up there, and Princeton and others. But are they doing all that needs to be done? Is there anything more that universities can do? And again, I juxtapose that to what's going on, up at Route 128 or out in Silicon Valley. What advice or what observations do you have about higher ed in New Jersey and their role in supporting the innovation economy? Dave, want to start with you and come back down?
Sure, thank you. Please do more. That's the bottom line. We are looking at how New York and New York-related universities are frankly stepping all over us in many ways. At Columbia, the Lang School has created a venture capital fund. NYU has scores of programs to support entrepreneurship, including providing grants to students when they graduate to start companies. These universities recognize, I think to a large degree, that entrepreneurship is a more likely career alternative for their students than ever before. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We also represent Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology. We did their joint venture with Cornell in New York. And the number of companies that come out of these universities is extraordinary. Now, here in New Jersey, leaps and bounds ahead of where we were. You're a perfect example of that with the Feliciano Center and what's going on at Montclair State University. Absolutely critical to the ecosystem. We see it at NJIT, we see it at Stevens, we see it at Princeton to an extent that we've never seen it before, but much, much more needs to be done.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, from the macro level, you have Dave's perspective. I'm more on the micro level. And what I'm seeing is that I would love to see better collaboration. And also, too, as I'm a Rutgers person, I went to the university, I go back and do events there, and I look at, on a macro level, like what Rutgers is doing, and I come back on a micro level saying, like, let me do events for your students. And I think there's not a great degree of collaboration between those two sides. So we're all working, and especially what you've done at MSU, like, we're all working collectively to better entrepreneurship in the state, but yet from what I see, again, ground floor, I don't see a lot of that collaborative opportunities coming down to me being on the streets doing programs directly with students.
Yeah. Greg, how about you?
I think New Jersey's doing a lot. I mean, just outside, you have Princeton, Rutgers, Stevens, NJIT. Anyone I left out? Seton Hall, yes. And I've been to all of these places, and they have staff, and they have very active programs to encourage entrepreneurship. I think there's a slight danger that sometimes you can overdo it. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I would say the majority of the population is not. And it's very important. You know, sometimes people think they should or they have to start up a company just because that's what everyone is talking about. But, you know, I think the state and universities should provide the resources and kind of the entrepreneur has to reach out and get it. I don't think the organization should reach out to them and pull them into the entrepreneurship. New Jersey EDA is also here, and they've done a great job of reaching out to both universities and small businesses to promote that.
Yeah, Greg, let me pick up on that. So just yesterday, in preparing a little reading for this panel, came across this study that, and again, there's lots of different studies, lots of different numbers, but that the millennial population, that 70% have indicated in a recent survey that at some point in their career they would like to start their own company. Now, when I do the math, 0.7 times the millennial population, that's a huge number. And by the way, I think it is one of the reasons why many universities are stepping up and creating full-fledged entrepreneurship programs, because if we listen to our customers, students, we'll hear and see that's what they want to do. But I know we're going into this gig economy, but and I know we're trying to equip our citizens, our populations with the skills they need, but this idea that huge amounts of folks want to start their own business, what's your reaction to that? Anybody?
I don't know if that many people want to start their business or they just think that they should. I joined RCA Laboratories in 1972, and unless you have gray hair, you probably never heard of RCA. But at that time, RCA was equal to IBM and GE, the other two initial companies that are still with us. And the idea was after you got an education, you joined a large firm, and I thought I would work at RCA until I was 65 and retire with a nice pension. That was the mindset back then. I think it's good now that people are not looking for another organization to secure their future, but that they're worried about it themselves. And I think, you know, that will push more people into entrepreneurship, and I think people will have better lives for it.
You know, it's really interesting point. You know, I think with building on that, there's entrepreneurship by choice, and there's entrepreneurship by necessity. And I think so many students who are graduating, young people who are coming up today, are finding that the career paths that were available to them when I was coming out of college don't exist anymore. You know, like you, Greg, you knew that there was a path for growth and success. I knew that when I was coming out as well. My children don't have that same opportunity. And so I think there's entrepreneurship by necessity, and I think that even if you don't start a business, we all have to be entrepreneurs of our own careers. And I believe, you know, this is a personal belief, I'm not speaking from a Carter when I say this, but I believe that our whole employment sector in this country is undergoing radical transformation. And I don't think that the typical person who is starting their career in 2017 is going to have certainly not one employer for a long period of time, but I don't even think they're going to have one employer at any time. And they're going to be employed by multiple employers simultaneously. And so that effectively everyone's going to have to be sort of and I don't mean this in a legal sense, kind of an independent contractor and the master of his or her own career. And they're going to have to manage that in a way that I don't think, you know, students of my generation had to.
I'll just add, I mean, when I quit my job, I thought being an entrepreneur running a business was so sexy. I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. I have no boss. I'm so into this. And it's so damn hard. I mean, anyone that's running a business, if you think it's easy, like it is the hardest thing I've ever done. And every day I get challenged, and every day I feel like, I mean, not anymore, but I felt a lot of times like, I hope I can get my old job back. So as much as I love seeing the interest and intrigue, and we were talking about this outside before, I've had people that I've hired and brought into my company within a few weeks were crying in my office saying that they never realized how hard it was going to be. So I challenge people a lot that maybe they want to become entrepreneurs, but if they really knew how the sausage was made, they may not want to eat the sausage because it is so stinking hard. Every day is a challenge. So I think you got to get experience of taking internships, and some of the university work is great, but it's very difficult.
So I think they look at Mark Zuckerberg and see you can make $20 billion or something and want to jump in and not understand the work. As each of you folks look across the ecosystem of New Jersey and from your vantage points, is there one thing that you see that really frustrates you, or it's a challenge that you, from your point of view, says, you know, we really have to do better in this area? I'll just throw that out to anybody.
I mean, I'll start off. I think I touched on before, the collaboration. It's funny if I'm doing an event at Rutgers and a day later maybe Seton Hall is doing the same event, and you're like, man, like what if we collaborated and had 300 people in the room and we got a better speaker than each of us got independently? I think there's so much opportunity, and I feel a lot of times we're competing for, which I host events, and I have 100 people come out for my event, and I will go to another event and I'll see the same sort of people. So I feel there's opportunities for us to minimize our time away from our families, but maximize the sort of return for our time being away from our families.
Esther Certain would probably
Yeah,
like that
that's-
too.
I think of Esther, yeah.
Who covers all of these events. Greg?
Reporter?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's how you find out if you're an entrepreneur or not, is, as Clark was saying, it's really hard, and you know, a lot of things that you want to be there aren't. And I think the really good entrepreneurs just do it. They just figure out a way. And they don't need necessarily to have secretarial help and copiers and how can we go and solve your problems. They'll figure it out. Just leave them alone. That's kind of my point of view.
You've just, actually, I think, hit the nail on the head, both of you, because it ties exactly together. The biggest frustration to me, and listen, I love New Jersey, and I think the tech community here is amazing. There is so much that is being done and that has been done and will be done here. But one of our greatest challenges is the lack of a core center. And everything that you guys said ties directly to that. You know, if you go to Silicon Valley, you're running into other entrepreneurs and investors when you go into the coffee shop. When you go up to the Route 128 corridor in Boston, everybody, it's a big community, but everybody knows everybody. And you see the serial success stories over and over and over again. New Jersey, despite being I think still the most dense populated state in the country, has no center of commerce for technology. I find that to be really frustrating. The technology exists in all four corners of the state, but we don't have a transportation system that allows us to be with each other on a really efficient basis. And so we end up going to multiple events in different parts of the state. We don't get to work, you know, to your point, Greg, we don't get to see how other people are solving the same problems that we as other entrepreneurs have. Mm-hmm. And I think that's truly one of the biggest challenges we have.
Yeah, let me just flip that question. And it could be the same answer, but what opportunity do you see out there that we really have to seize or should seize? Is that a different answer?
Not for me to say. It's for all of you to find it. You've heard this over and over again at the different panels. I don't invest in industries. I don't look for new technologies. I look for good people with drive, the kind of stuff Clark was talking about.
I would say just the one thing I find hard sometimes is I want to be around brilliant people a lot, and I want them to push me to do great things, and I want to learn from their experiences and mistakes. And I have to drive to do that. And I'm sorry, I'm running my business. I'm I try to make my time as best as possible, use my time as best as possible. So if I was in a community that we all lived, we walk out of our house, we all live within 5 minutes of each other, and we get together, that's great. But I mean, we're all hours away driving, so same reasons why you lose touch with your friends who don't live closer, you don't have a wife or kid or a dog, you don't have the same sort of community around you if you live further away from others.
Dave, any big opportunity from your lens?
Well, it was talked about a little bit in the first panel, so I'll do this sort of on an industry perspective. I think there are enormous opportunities in virtual reality, augmented reality, but in the B2B marketplace. We also I think you guys talked about gaming, for example. We're seeing extraordinary opportunities in business-to-business applications of virtual reality and augmented reality. Coupled with that, artificial intelligence. We need to really step up our game there. There's a lot going on in other states where universities and venture funds are partnering to create programs for spurring the growth of investment in artificial intelligence. I would hate to see us miss that boat.
Yeah. How about you guys? Any questions for the panelists? And there are microphones, by the way.
I'm actually fine. I don't need one, sir. So the question I have is, I hear a lot of talk about colleges and bringing the education and curriculum to colleges for entrepreneurs. And don't you think it's a little late by that point? I've noticed a steady, well, not steady, a very rapid decline in STEM qualified kids graduating to high schools. And even the ones going to college, we've got to be honest with ourselves. College is not the end-all, do-all. Certifications are running everything now. Okay, your C++ for your IT engineers, your cyber warfare hacks are graduating and going to cyber warfare and actually having no college degree. So what are we doing about that?
So thoughts on the K-12 system and how they're preparing students for this economy?
I might be old school, but I really think the basics are very worthwhile. Mathematics, if we're all STEM, mathematics is the basis of all science and technology. And that's the best thing a student can do anywhere, is to get as much mathematics as they can possibly take. Communication skills, that's the other thing. Many engineers think, look at this widget, how great this widget is, and yet if someone isn't out selling this thing and convincing people why they need this and so forth, it's not going to go. So I would like to emphasize the basics.
You raise such an important question, and clearly something that, as I look around this room, none of us are equipped to handle, because, and this is going to sound political, and I don't mean it that way, but it requires a political solution. Because the fact of the matter is, education in the United States is purely locally controlled. So it is community by community by community. And we need to have, in my view, a national emphasis on that kind of quality education. And without it, yes, you're right. By the time kids get to college, it may very well be too late. Not enough kids are already sort of have a sufficient background. But if I had the say in any of this, I would do what John Kennedy did when we were looking for a race to the moon. And we need a national emphasis on quality education. We have a decentralized, local control system, and as a result, there's no sort of continuity of effort.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. At Montclair, we see lots of students who come into our institution, and some of us will make value judgments that they really don't have a clue about the kind of skills and behavior and culture that's needed in an innovative economy. But when we put those students in a completely immersive experience, which is what we do see creativity that starts to flourish, and you put them in a team with 3 or 4 different-minded folks, the design thinking model, and you start to get amazing results out of that. It's just that I don't know if it's too late when you get to college, but certainly it could start a lot earlier. That's for sure. But but I'm optimistic based on what I see in the classroom. And, but also higher education is being disrupted, the whole certificate thing you mentioned. I can go out and I can actually get a programming certificate, fairly quickly in just a few months. Because programming is changing so quickly these days in terms of what it takes to become a programmer. But still, yet you need all those other problem-solving skills and the right culture, as well. My 2 cents. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm loving this this panel, by the way. This is terrific. Okay. A quick point on this subject. So I teach, and David, going to your entrepreneurship by necessity versus by choice. I teach entrepreneurship over at NJIT. We get 2 types of students. At daytime, we have the honors and the ECE and the CCS students. And at night, I get the entrepreneurs by necessity. And they take night course because they have day jobs. And they're not academically strong students. But they have in general, they have an entrepreneurial drive that my day students just don't. So what makes a good entrepreneur? Is it the STEM background? I'm sure that's critical for the innovation part of it. But for the business success part of it, there might be more to it than that. Now my question, Greg, you mentioned that some people are not cut out to be entrepreneurs. So my question to the panel is, are we facing a quantity versus quality dilemma in our entrepreneurship education programs? Should we?
I think it's completely self-regulating because the people that just don't have the drive to fight through will fall by the wayside.
Are we setting them up to fail, though?
We're not doing anything. It's up to them.
Just one, I think entrepreneurship education, if it's done correctly, which is, I think it boils down to problem solving, how to, look at a problem within a system and how to understand the problem and not just use your, whatever behavior or thought process you've used for the last, 20 years to solve a problem, that you look at it, through different lenses. That's not just an entrepreneurial skill. That's a life skill. It's an entrepreneurial skill if you're in a corporation. Just the kind of qualities around understanding your world, looking at the problem deeply, coming up with solutions, trying those solutions quickly, failing. I mean, that whole kind of culture is, again, it's entrepreneurial culture, but it's also, it's a life skill and a skill for anywhere you go. And as harking back to my last comment, I don't think we do that well, but I think that's an opportunity to do it well.
I would say in the university setting, the students I've worked with, you have a confined environment. It's very safe.
Yes.
The minute you get out there and we talk about like this desperation, this drive, it's no longer safe and there's blood, sweat, and tears. So as quickly as humanly possible, getting students out into the real world and working, I mean, not necessarily with a person like me, but I'd say an earlier stage startup or an entrepreneur, because they will see all the exact struggles they're going to go to if they want to take the challenge as well. It's a lot savvier and cooler to go to Audible, and it's great. There's cool offices, ping pong tables, but it's not realistic. That's not what your office is going to be like. It's going to be in your mom's basement, and it's going to be horrible, and you're going to be frustrated. So to deal with that and see that firsthand will kind of, you said the self-selection process will help to push people into the right avenues that they think they could be successful.
Yes.
Yeah, a somewhat related question. So technology has clearly created a lot of benefits for society, no doubt about it. But along with that, there has come a lot of challenges for workers. So for example, it has lowered the cost of labor, it's automated certain tasks, it's made workers less needed in some cases. And as we look to the new economy, you see a lot of shift toward companies where winner takes all, or industries where winner takes all, because scale economies are important. So my question is, so the shifts that I previously mentioned, it has, I think, slowly, it's contributing to changing the definition of an entrepreneurship in the shared economy. So what can universities do to address potentially a big gap in opportunity in the entrepreneurial world, where entrepreneurship doesn't just have to be about starting something where you go out and get funding and it has to grow to $1 billion and you have to exit, but rather there's this whole swath of the economy where entrepreneurship is just, it's about starting something and controlling some risk and creating some value, but it's not at the same level necessarily, but there's certainly a need to prepare people to have those skill sets, deal in the economy with some of the challenges with working for yourself and so forth. And so, and then to your point about people failing, there seems to be an opportunity also to help people transition out of entrepreneurship back into more traditional paths to the extent that they exist.
Dennis, I think you really hit on that. The fact of the matter is, we need entrepreneurs in the largest of organizations as well. And when you think about big pharma, for example, we need people who are entrepreneurial there, who are going to be thinking about, how do you deal with some disease state or medical condition. We need big thinkers who are in energy, who may be in some of the largest energy companies in the world, but they still have to be entrepreneurs. So I think it really does come down to problem solving, which is what Dennis was talking about. And I'm personally a big believer, in addition to STEM education, to strong liberal arts education. I think we have to have people who are well-read, who understand history, who understand human behavior, so that they can combine those skills to solve problems that we don't even know exist yet. And that's ultimately what education needs to be about. And you can be, and I think you need to be, an entrepreneur, whether you're going to start a business or work in some other business. And you started your question with something that I think is a real challenge, and that is, in so many industries, we see not only declining capital intensity, which I addressed earlier, but declining labor intensity. We need far fewer workers than ever before, and the risk is going down to the lowest common denominator. So we need to find ways to invest in new industries that are going to create the sort of high wage, high benefits bearing jobs that you might see in life science or in nanotechnology that remain very capital intensive industries. I think that's a challenge that we need to address.
But you were right about your comment, why do you have to grow the business and sell it for a lot of money? You're right, it doesn't have to be that. I mean, think of how many small businesses you deal with, shops, plumbers, carpenters, that work for themselves. And their plan is not to sell their business. Their plan is just to make a nice living for themselves. Maybe the driving force is not to have a boss. But entrepreneurship has all kinds of forms, and you're right, it doesn't have to be to sell for a lot of money.
Here and then back here next.
Hi, my name is Leanna Roman Lozada, and I've been called a serial entrepreneur. I started when I was 20, and I've had 3 multi-million-dollar businesses by the age of 30. And I'm here because I want to see how the future, because business is changing. But I was just interviewing someone who had a graduate degree, and she was trying to get a $40,000 job. And I made more coming out 25 years ago from college. So, it's a different world. And one of the best advice that someone gave me when I started, and you guys have touched on it, is don't quit your day job, because it is really hard, and you can be successful one month and not the next, and you're constantly changing. I can delegate a lot of work. Right now, I own Providence Medical Daycare for 17 years. It's the largest medical daycare in New Jersey. I started out as a minority female business in doing construction and delivering bridges and starting companies. So I just developed the need. So let's say if you see a possibility, you research it, you develop it, and I didn't make any money in the contracts the first 6 months, but I figured it out. So the thing is that you have to allow yourself to fail, because then you know how it doesn't work. And then you just keep at it. So the bottom line is that I feel, I have 4 children, I feel you don't have an easy option to work for a big company. I always wanted to do it because I'm a minority female, and I was at AT&T, And basically they did something which kind of everybody was one sort of way in engineering at that time. And I said, if I'm going to be a president of a company, it's going to have to be my own. So I chose that early, and all I'm saying is that it's very hard to make $1 million in 1 year. It can be done, but it's very hard. So if you have a day job or steady income, it allows to pay for your marketing, for your computer. Like that Apple computer is awesome for an entrepreneur. I mean, you can do a million things with that. So the reason why I wanted to say something is I have 4 children, and I'm always telling them work harder. You know, take out the garbage, go the extra step. So there's a work ethic that if you don't have it, you won't succeed because you want someone else to do it. So my best advice and why I've succeeded is because I don't give up. I told my son, you know, failure is not an option. So, you know, if you want to give yourself that room to succeed, don't quit your day job. Get a steady job. Don't assume you're going to make enough for the mortgage, especially if you're young, you're in a relationship. It's too many difficulties. That's one side. The other side is as an entrepreneur, if I spent all the time looking at everything that's out there, I wouldn't be able to do my job because there's so much opportunities with SBA, with people like you. There's so many people out there willing to help entrepreneurs. I personally think there's too much. Like, I could do this all day long, all week long. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the simple fact is that if I want to be successful, and I apologize for dragging on, if I want to be successful, I can't ask her to do it or you to do it. I can't come up to you, David, and say, gosh, you're so smart. Why don't you do my business for me? And so once you get past the fact that you have to do it all, then you can do it. But just don't quit your day job. And work hard. And you will have ups and downs. And if you make it 1 month, doesn't mean you'll make it the next. You just got to act like you're always hungry, always looking. Thanks.
Thanks for your comment. Question up here?
Not a question, a comment. Catherine Kish from Einstein's Alley, one of those core centers that you were talking about, David. I want to remind us not only about women entrepreneurs, as Dennis did, an enormously important sector for us. I want to remind us about immigrants. 28% of the businesses in New Jersey are owned and operated by immigrants. Immigrants have provided an enormous amount of energy and enthusiasm and entrepreneurship to our community. This evening, NJBIA and Einstein's Alley, among others, are putting on the Immigrant Entrepreneur Awards up at Bergen College to recognize 8 great people who have built businesses employing lots and lots of New Jerseyans. And they also, going back to the school question, they also have improved many of our local school systems because they are demanding of their children real accomplishment. So I'd like to remind us in this group to support immigration reform, to support immigrants in our community, because they are adding to New Jersey's economy and entrepreneurship in a very powerful way.
Thanks, Catherine. I see Don has his hand up.
Thank you. I'd like your reaction to an observation we have of what maybe is a new alternative for the entrepreneur, because we tend to think of it in a sort of binary fashion. Either you are going to be acquired or you're going to have global domination. Right? Either you grow to displace the existing companies or you quickly get consumed. But what we're seeing with so many of our major industries facing disruptive technology changes, the reaction is to form dynamic supply chains, not just supply chains, but innovation chains. So there really becomes maybe a new alternative for the entrepreneur to continue to persist, in which they assemble on a project basis or a product basis with a terminal OEM as a client, then dissolve and reassemble in new teams, which again calls for a new skill set, not just to be entrepreneurial within your own organization, but to be entrepreneurial across multiple organizations. I wonder if any of you see that either happening already or coming down the stream.
Most of my companies are not doing the same thing now that they started doing 5 years, 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's one of the ingredients you have to be aware of. You know, you might start making a widget, but quickly hopefully you'll find a service that widget covers. And if you just stick to making the widget, you're probably not going to have much of a future.
Laura?
Thank you. Oh, they just handed me, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to touch on your point about the need for a core hub, because although we have some great smaller hubs all around New Jersey, they are all around New Jersey, they're not connected well by transit. We have nothing like Silicon Valley or Cambridge or Research Triangle. We just don't have that. If we wanted to have it, what would it take? Like if we said to everybody, we're going to pick one place and funnel everything into that one spot, what would it take to lure the entrepreneurs? And what would it take to lure the VCs? And which one do you need first to attract the other? How would you do it?
Do you want an opinion as well? I think a lot of what you're saying I see happening in Newark from the past 5 years. I think it has a transit hub, so it's easy for people to come in and out. In my opinion, I think you need the entrepreneurs first because it creates that culture, it creates innovation, it creates opportunity, and money will come in when that happens. So what I've seen at NJIT, at Rutgers, at Audible now as well, there's so much happening right there, and you're all within walking distance. So for me, when I come there, I park my car, it's so easy. I'm a Rutgers guy, I love to have it at Rutgers, but I have to drive 45 minutes to Rutgers, and then I park my car and then I hop on a bus to go to the next campus. So it just is unrealistic compared to what the millennial entrepreneur is looking for, just to make it easy and convenient, and it's all right there.
Yeah, I think it's more cultural than, you know, if you looked at California, if you were to reinvent it now, you would pick Los Angeles, right? That's where the big population center. You wouldn't pick Silicon Valley, but I guess the conditions were ripe there. You not only had the banks and the universities, but you just had the culture that started there.
There's an initiative underway in the state, and so I'm going to tell you factually, it's got nothing to do with me personally. I'm not advocating for it. But there's an initiative like that going on in Holmdel, New Jersey right now. It's called BellWorks. It's the old Bell Labs facility that's being repurposed as a tech center. And if you think about the building, and I think this is factually correct, the building is so large that it's basically the Empire State Building on its side. It's 2 million square feet of space. A developer acquired that property with the sole purpose of creating a technology center. And to your point, Clark, you know, you have to have the kind of amenities that will attract the entrepreneurs. So what attracts entrepreneurs? You talked about transportation. You talked about, you know, bars, restaurants, light retail.
Customers attract me as well.
Of
Lots
course.
of customers.
And so they're creating this indoor promenade that is going to be an attempt to attract those kinds of entrepreneurs. You have to have a great school system, right? I mean, we're going to see some of the New York millennial entrepreneurs age out of wanting to live in studio apartments in Soho, and when they marry and have children, and they're going to come to New Jersey, just like I did, because of good schools for your kids. But if you can marry that with tech hubs like that, it's a very ambitious undertaking. I don't know if it'll succeed or not, but it's leased out hundreds of thousands of square feet already. Most recently, I think it's PSE&G JCP&L, that has signed on to take space in there. There's going to be a new county library in the space, a national hotel chain. And so I think you have to look at those issues. Now, the downside is it's Holmdel, New Jersey. So, you know, beautiful spot, but what do you do about transportation? You're not on the rail line. You're not on a bus line. You can't walk to transportation. So they're doing deals with Uber and Zipcars and running a shuttle every I think it's hour or so. So, you know, you've got Newark, I think, is one great solution and is appealing because of the urban environment. An initiative like BellWorks may succeed for different reasons. But we need to experiment with things like that.
Actually, I think this is an incredible conversation because to the question of how do we make our state more innovative, I think this is a good question that we all should debate and figure out an optimal solution if there is such a thing. Questions, one here. How about the middle? Tom, I'll get to you next. Let's do this one and then get to Tom.
First of all, George Johnson, New Jersey School Boards Association, so thank you for your input on bringing STEM education. My other hat is I'm an Army STEM specialist, permanently placed at school board. So the one thing, it's just a comment I want to put out to the entrepreneurs out there, the young lady down there, 3 multi-million-dollar companies, outstanding. You do have to do it yourself. You do have to plan for failure. I'll tell you that as being a non-commissioned officer for 23 years in the Army. You plan for failure, you're always achieve success. But when you start hiring, you need a solid team behind you. Please turn to your Show Your Stripes campaign, your USA Jobs, hire those vets. There is nobody more loyal than someone that just took off a uniform.
Thank you. Tom was next.
Great conversation. Very excited about where Michelle started today, which was really about New Jersey as an ecosystem of innovation. And my personal opinion and my life passion for about 20 years has been that New Jersey is innovation, period. The diversity of industry and people. The clusters of innovation, life sciences, logistics, financial services, high tech, telecommunications, everything that came out of Sarnoff. So the fact is, we are a small state, and we can be connected by transit in about an hour. And I've worked in Newark, Camden, and Trenton, and I'm excited about Trenton personally. But I don't think it's about place. I think it's about this idea of a better collaborative network, a master network that brings together NJTC and BioNJ, Innovation New Jersey, Opportunity New Jersey. We don't have a mindset that's owned outside of this room very much by our politicians, and maybe even to a lesser extent, the CEOs of our companies who depend on workforce. And I hear it with the college presidents and university presidents and the county colleges that they really care about collaboration, but there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So my question to the panel would be, pick a CEO in New Jersey, or a college president, or the next governor, and what would you advise them?
Tom, that was my final question, so that was great.
I'll talk to you Tuesday night.
No, I think that's a great
Other
question.
than usual platitudes, I don't really have an answer.
It is a good question because it gets to public policy. And again, Bob Hugan talked a little bit about public policy up front, about getting involved in it. But the question that I would have is, I don't know what question it is, but I think we need to challenge them on what policy or what policies that we should tweak. Because if you think about our future economy, let's say the next governor is there for 8 years, so we're talking, out to like 2025 or something. Just the whole driverless cars things. 3 million truck drivers are going to lose their jobs probably over the next 10 years or so. What do we do with those folks? What do we do with the displaced workers, in our state? What we do on the education front or on the investment front? Are there more that we can do there? The net loss carry forward provisions or, incentives, those kinds of things. I think we need to have that conversation and figure that all out. We are out of time? Close. Any last question? Okay, last question. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Kathleen Addison, Morgan Life Science. We have seen a lot of innovation coming out of Europe, particularly in life sciences. So my question is, have you seen that yourself? And is it coming from their higher ed or government, or do you know?
Life sciences.
Life sciences, where's it coming from?
In Europe, in particular.
Oh.
We see a lot more government involvement and government incentives coming from other countries, including Israel, for example. We're seeing a lot of life science technology, but it is, the government has a larger role than I think our government has a taste for, and we're certainly seeing that. And university involvement has always been absolutely critical, but so much of that university involvement itself comes, underlying that has been with government money.
So it gets to the role of tech transfer, and I think we can always improve tech transfer function at our universities. But I'll tell you this, that I'm aware of amazing research is taking place in this state, in the universities, just amazing research. And part of what I see now that I sit on the higher education side of the fence, there are faculty doing incredible, powerful research, but they're more focused on getting tenure and writing those research papers, and they don't want to get in the way of, that's something that has commercialized value, and I don't want to go down that road because I'm going to go back and recycle and do research, publish, and so on. Thank you very much. Great audience. I want to thank NJBIA for putting us together. Incredible, Melanie.